The third and final category we're going to look at are emotional and behavioral disorders. Once again, we abbreviate, so we call these EBD. These disorders include a variety of mental illnesses. So we talk about students who are emotionally disturbed, students who have major anxiety, students who have conduct disorder, so they lash out. Often, students with conduct disorder can tend to be violent, it's just a natural reaction, and obsessive compulsive disorder. So, these are students who have to have things done in a certain order. They want to wash their hands over and over again, that kind of thing. And obviously, these disorders present difficulties in school in terms of students being hyperactive, very aggressive. They might be very withdrawn. They tend to show immaturity in their behavior, and they tend to have learning difficulties. Not that they have a learning disability, but rather these mental illnesses get in the way of them learning. And these are challenging disorders. As I've mentioned before, these are becoming more and more common in our students, which I hope you're thinking, why? Good question. So, how we define emotional behavioral disorders is that we're looking for conditions, not that just one day a child has a bad day and lashes out and hits another student. That would not be considered an emotional behavioral disorder. These are conditions that go on for a long period of time and that they're strong enough that they're affecting the child's educational performance. And you look at, we have to rule out other things, right? It's not an intellectual issue. It's not a health issue. Um, it has to be something else that's going on. But we see they have a hard time maintaining quality relationships with others. Their behaviors are very inappropriate under normal circumstances, so they tend to overreact. They show over time depression or an extreme level of unhappiness. And they also might have kind of irrational fears, or they're constantly, this hurts, or they're throwing up on a daily basis at recess, things that show something else is going on. And the emotional behavioral disorders are broken down into three categories. We have students who have externalizing behaviors, which means they act out aggressively. We have students who internalize their behavior. So these are the ones who show extreme anxiety, extreme depression, they're extremely withdrawn. And then we have low incidence disorders, which means we don't have a lot of students who have these, but they are serious. So, such as schizophrenia. There are students who are schizophrenic at a very young age. Not too many, but obviously that's a serious disorder. So, how do we treat students with EBD? We, first of all, have to look at what the disorder is. So, things, eating disorders, right? We don't see too many of those in elementary, but middle school and high school, we see students, primarily girls, but who are bulimic, have anorexia. So, when we look at these types of disorders, then we have to determine what's appropriate. Counseling, behavior therapy, where we look at doing behavioral modification, medication in some cases, such as bipolar disorder. If we can get a student on the right medication, bipolar disorder is very treatable, but it's making sure the child is taking the right medication, the right dosage, that kind of thing. Family therapy oftentimes is very important because oftentimes parents, siblings aren't sure how to deal with the type of disorder that they're seeing. Also teaching the child problem-solving skills. All right, when you start to feel this or when you start to feel the need to lash out, what is it that you can do instead? So some things that we can do to support students with EBD are creating behavioral contracts and setting up, all right, if you can do this, right, here is a reward, that kind of thing. And obviously, we want to involve the parents in that as well. Holding class meetings where students can just share how they're feeling, problem solving, those types of things are really important. One of the things that I used to do at the end of the day is we had a celebration meeting, last 5 minutes of the day. So students would come to the ROG and I would say, all right, what are we going to celebrate about today? And it was really neat because at the beginning of the year, I had to model, right? And I would do things like, I'd like to celebrate that everybody passed their math test. Or I'd like to celebrate when we had a guest come into our room. You were all so polite and friendly. And it was just amazing because students would take that and run with it. And they would do things like Maury, who had some of these issues that we've talked about, students would be like, I'd like to celebrate that Maury had a really good day and he didn't hit anybody today. So he was getting that positive reinforcement from his peers, which was so important. And it just made the day end on a very positive note for everybody. Training students in peer mediation. So if you start to see one of your classmates having a meltdown, what can you do? And also that student who's prone to meltdowns knows I can go and talk to this person. Using art is a powerful way to allow students to express their emotions. Role playing, appropriate behavior, and problem solving techniques. Oftentimes we assume that students already come in knowing those skills. And if nobody has shown them effective problem solving techniques, they haven't learned those. We also have to give our students responsibilities. So getting to know each student's interests and thinking, okay, she responds well to being in charge of the library and checking out our classroom books to others. So that gives that student a sense of worth, which is so important. Once again, making sure we're incorporating our students' interests, giving them choice, which leads to empowerment. And also for students with EBD, it's important that they have a safe space where they can go if they need some quiet time. It can just be a corner in the room where maybe you have a beanbag. You're seeing people, teachers have the weighted blankets, which can help students who have anxiety just feel safe and secure. It could be in a classroom next door. It's whatever you set up based on what your students need, but just to have that place can sometimes be really, really empowering. So I've given you an overview of these 3 types of behavioral challenges. And one of the dangers of lumping everybody together under this category is that then we make assumptions. Oh, all students with EBD are going to be like this. So I want you to remember, all students are different. So within even ADHD, you're going to have some students who are more physically active than others, some who can attend to the task longer than others. So remember that. It's not a one size fits all. Remember, all students have strengths. That is our job, is to find those strengths no matter how deep we need to dig. All students will need different things to succeed. And it is your responsibility as a classroom teacher to do everything you can to help each and every student be successful. Sometimes everything you can means saying, I'm stuck. I'm out of ideas of how to help this student. So you need to go and collaborate with other staff. Talk to your administrator. Give me some suggestions. Is there a training I can go to? Is there something I can read? Another part is trial and error, trying different strategies and documenting their success. Some things will work, some won't. Some will work with Johnny over here, but they didn't work with Julia over here. Your job is find what works for each student, find the strengths in each student, and plan lessons with all of your students in mind. So even if I know, all right, the vast majority of my students can focus on my 20-minute math lesson, but if I know Julia can't, then what am I going to do to break that up into 5 minutes, and then they do an activity, and then another 5 minutes of my lesson delivery, and then they do another activity, right? I do that from the beginning when I'm planning my lesson. All right, so you've got a brief overview of these 3 types of challenges. And in class, then, we will be looking at more specific ways to support these types of students.